Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to this special event that Broadband Illinois, or the Partnership for Connected Illinois, is hosting to discuss the Southside Gigabit Challenge and Chicago's broadband future. My name is Drew Clark. I'm Executive Director of Broadband Illinois, and pleased to have a wonderful panel to discuss the Southside Gigabit Challenge Award winner, which Governor Quinn announced yesterday, and to kick off a discussion about what this means for Chicago's broadband future. But before I get to our excellent panel and give brief introductions, I thought I would read a quote that came yesterday following the announcement of the award winner that Gigabit Squared had received the first award of $2 million from the Governor's Gigabit Challenge. A second award was also announced yesterday in Aurora for $1 million, and I understand there will be additional awards announced in the near future. But yesterday, following the news item and the discussion, there was a story that quoted Federal Communications Commission Chairman Julius Genachowski, where he said, "In today's fast-moving and globally competitive economy, our challenge is to ensure the United States has a strategic bandwidth advantage. Realizing the need for speed is important for driving next-generation innovation. Today's partnership among the state of Illinois, the University of Chicago, and Gigabit Squared will bring new levels of connectivity to Chicago communities. It's exactly the kind of initiative we need to ensure the U.S. can win the global bandwidth race." So the news is beginning to come in nationwide to what's going on here in Illinois, and we're very excited to be a part of that and to help facilitate that. And just a word or two about our organization. Partnership for Connected Illinois is a nonprofit statewide organization based in Springfield with E-team coordinators throughout the state in all 10 regions of the state. And we work to facilitate better broadband and better lives. Our goal is through collecting information, broadband mapping, and other forms of data and research, we then bring stakeholders together, bring broadband providers together with economic and community development officials, and we work to make sure that individuals have access to and have the training they need to use higher capacity networks. And we're extremely excited by this announcement yesterday because it is about the highest level connectivity, gigabit connectivity, and how it is coming to these 9 neighborhoods in Chicago. The last point I would make before I lead to the panelists is obviously there is a special broadband challenge going on right now. The city of Chicago on September 24th unveiled an ambitious broadband initiative with 3 missions: gigabit last mile fiber infrastructure in 15 innovation zones throughout the city, bringing cheap broadband access to underserved neighborhoods in the city, as well as developing training programs to teach the digital skills, and finally launch a network of free Wi-Fi hotspots throughout city parks, plazas, and public spaces. So we certainly want to continue and help foster this dialogue. Obviously, there is a time frame for the request for information that the city has spelled out and published on their website. We certainly hope that we'll be able to continue this discussion and are tentatively planning on another follow-on webinar and discussion next Wednesday, although the details have not yet been concluded. So stay tuned for that. But we certainly want our panelists to speak to what they know best, to this 9 neighborhood initiative here in the mid-south and south sides of Chicago. But we want to have an eye towards what this means for the city, and we want to help facilitate, however we can as Broadband Illinois, those responses that might be made to the request for information. All right, well, let's now turn to our panelists. We're very excited to have from your left to right, Mark Ainsbury, who's the president and co-founder of Gigabit Squared. And as the president co-founder, he's worked closely with communities, stakeholders, and broadband providers to visualize, create, and implement open source digital economic development and open network strategies. He's joined by Bob Jennings, who's the Executive Vice President of Gigabit Squared. Do I have you two right? Yes, I do have you in the right order. Bob is the Executive Vice President and co-founder. He provides experience and leadership that enables funding for public entities, private sources, as well as public-private partnerships in doing the digital economic development that Gigabit Squared is working on. Third is Laura Lane. Laura is the co-director of the Woodlawn Broadband Expansion Partnership. I don't have a longer bio for you, Laura. My apologies, but Laura is a dynamo, and she's really been instrumental in making sure that this community of Woodlawn became an anchor from which this project radiated outward. So we're very excited to hear Laura's history and perspective and next steps on taking this to get the higher level connectivity for Woodlawn and the other neighborhoods. She's joined by Pierre Clark, who's also co-director of the Woodlawn Broadband Expansion Partnership. We're really pleased that Pierre is able to join us and to participate in this discussion so that we can, as he said to me yesterday, how can you be a part of the solution and make sure this goes forward? We're also very pleased that William W. Towns, who's the Assistant Vice President for Neighborhood Initiatives at the University of Chicago, is with us too. The University of Chicago, of course, is a key part of this initiative and is contributing $1 million as well as assisting in raising an additional $1 million for this $9 million project at a minimum. And we look forward to hearing more details about the University of Chicago's involvement. Finally, we have Brad Housewright. Brad is the Director of E-Teams for Broadband Illinois. Brad has been working throughout the state, not just in Chicago, but literally he's trekked all up and down the state from Cairo to Rockford and from Macomb to Effingham as we've worked with many dozens of applicants for the Gigabit Challenge. And we know there are other applicants out there, and we know there are other awards yet to be announced, and we look forward to those, of course. But what Brad and I at Broadband Illinois are very keen on is making sure that all applicants, irrespective of whether you are winners or not selected, have opportunities to coalesce and to convene, connect, and collaborate for building higher capacity networks and more opportunities for usage. So Brad will help fill in the bigger picture for this initiative and how it ties into other activities throughout the state. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up. We would invite each of you to come to the podium so that we can have the benefit of the microphone and so that our audience on the webinar can also hear you as well as our audience here in person. So let's go ahead and turn it over to you, Mark. Okay, Bob Jennings first.
Thank you, Drew. So I'd like to start out by telling you a couple of stories about what this challenge really means to Gigabit Squared, but more importantly, what it means to the neighborhoods here in the Mid-South of Chicago. We're very pleased with the award. Obviously, it's something that we feel is important not only to our company, to the communities that, the neighborhoods and the community that is fostered here in the Mid-South of Chicago, but also to the kind of innovation, and you've mentioned it before, that that we've seen with the kinds of partnerships that are forged by broadband adoption, by technology innovation, and by what we call digital economic development. Digital economic development to us is something that over time will really be the partnership we have with the neighborhoods here. That kind of partnership is forged by the dialogue that'll be ongoing. And we've had the good fortune of having a dialogue with some of the communities, with community leaders such as Pierre and Laura and a whole host of others over the course of the time that we've been working with the University of Chicago to bring this project to fruition and to get us to this starting point. It's pretty exciting to know that the kind of work that we're doing at Gigabit Squared can be replicated and can be grown through the Mid-South and really be made to be an example of how you can take technology, match it up with people, take the resources that are available from the public sector and match it with private sector investment and community engagement. And all of that together is really the secret sauce for making this project work and to grow throughout the 9 neighborhoods. I was struck, we were having a community meeting and we were talking about something I mentioned yesterday in my remarks, which is the meaningful use of technology. How do you get technology that's out there into use in a way that really impacts people's lives? And one of the stories that came to mind as I was thinking about this yesterday was we were having a community meeting and talking about what does this really mean to some of the young people in the communities that we're talking about in the 9 neighborhoods. What does it really mean to their lives? And at one of the one of the representatives of a technical college said, we have young students that are very, very active in developing the kind of applications, the kind of services. These apps are ones that could be very meaningful for other students that would help in terms of what their involvement in the programs that they're ongoing in the school itself. And he was just bemoaning the fact that without the kind of connectivity that we're talking about, bringing this gigabit speed broadband to the Mid-South, without that kind of connectivity and without that bridge to be able to make it work, those students, while they had this great talent and this great enthusiasm for this, there just wasn't the right mechanism in place when they got back to their community, when they're outside of the school itself, to be able to continue this kind of work developing these apps. And it just struck me that that was the kind of bridge that we need, and what the challenge will enable us to do is to get out into the communities and get broadband, both wireline and wireless, into folks' homes so they can actually use the technology in a powerful and meaningful way. One of the other projects Gigabit Squared has worked on that I think is emblematic of how this kind of technology, this gigabit speed broadband, can really impact lives. We have a project that is sort of an offshoot of the kind of GigU project that is underlying all of this that we're talking about today, and it's a program up in Cleveland called Judson Manor. And Judson Manor is an assisted living facility, and we were able to, a project that my co-founder Mark Ansbury was intimately involved in developing, really developed gigabit speed fiber into the rooms of the residents of this assisted living facility, with the idea that you were going to be able to deliver healthcare in a more meaningful way, in a way that is takes folks that would otherwise have to go and get transportation, go to the hospital, spend a part of the day getting their tests done, doing the kind of diagnostic work. Through this kind of ultra high speed, gigabit speed fiber, we're able to have those patients through a video link up with their physician, through other technology that actually we're in the process of helping to bring to market, are able to have that kind of connectivity in their room, in their residence, and be able to have it allow them to have those tests done without having to go to the doctor, going to the hospital and spending the time to do that. And it's those kind of resources that are available, and that this kind of technology, as it goes into the home health area, as it impacts safety and security. I mean, you can go down the line. Energy management is another area that all of those are ways that the gigabit speed broadband can impact people's lives today. I mean, it's not out in the future. It's not something that, we know that all of the applications and services and revenue that comes from this project is not going to be recognized on day one or the first year or second year. It's really a process. But the kind of technology is out there, and we're in the process of helping develop both the next generation of networks, but also the next generation of students, the next generation of healthcare workers, to be able to train folks in some of the new fields like nurse informatics, where you can take the actual kind of technology aspect of what we're doing and match it up with some of the skills that folks have in nursing to be able to actually create that next generation of workers. So to Gigabit Squared, this challenge is very meaningful because it allows us to, as I mentioned before to somebody here earlier, it allows you to skate to the puck. We're really looking to be able to develop those services that are both forward-leaning, but also ones that we know we can get to today. And it's very powerful. It's something that we're really excited about, and we're excited to partner with all of the Mid-South to be able to get this done. The work that we're doing with the University of Chicago is just tremendous. We've had a great relationship, and the dialogue that we've had with the university is particularly important to this program, in that it's really the anchor underlying all of this is that kind of research and development, the development of networks that are going to impact the university, keep the kind of high quality programs, the faculty, the folks that work at the medical center, all of that in the neighborhoods that surround the university, and allow that impact of that research and development and that capacity to grow throughout the Mid-South. So it's a great partnership. It's something that we're really excited to keep moving forward, and very pleased that Governor Quinn saw that this really was something that's not only impactful for us as a company, but also for the communities and for the university. So I'd like to have my colleague, Mark Ansberry, talk a little bit about the actual build. By trade, I'm really an economic development person, so this is the part that I'm excited about, which is the next phase of this is really the community engagement, that a process that'll take over the next couple months and start that dialogue to be able to reach out to the communities and really start to work. So this is really the fun part for us, is being able to find out where those services, how those applications can be made, and really make that impact in folks' lives. So, Mark?
So I'm the geek. And at the end of the day, what we really want to be able to enable here is a shared infrastructure. And what we're hoping to deploy here is really an innovative model in how fiber and wireless can be deployed in the neighborhoods in such a way that it's open to other providers and other services, that it creates an environment that attracts developers, that it creates an environment that attracts providers, and it creates an environment that the community itself can build its own applications and services in the network. And we call this open architecture. What it means is we're going to build fiber, and we're going to allow other access providers, other service providers to connect and use that infrastructure. It means that this is a resource, really an asset within the community that can be leveraged by multiple providers, wireless ISPs, by other carriers that This is meant to be a long-term asset for the community. When we talk about fiber, we talk about this in the scale of 20 to 30 years, long-term infrastructure. So we call this multi-tenant. And a multi-tenant environment means then all comers, pay their fair share, but all comers come to the table. Now, the purpose of fiber, though, is to have that big ultra capacity to provide the scalability, the innovations that are going to come out of the university. They're going to come out of the businesses, come out of the minds of the individual citizens who are here creating those opportunities, creating those kinds of environments. And so that kind of encouragement, creating that kind of innovative platform, that means the sky's the limit. But we're in a world of mobility. We're in a world of flexibility. You operate not only in the school, but operate in the library, not only operate there, but operate the clinic, and then operate at home. How do you get access to the same level of connectivity, the same applications, and the same service if you don't have a layered architecture that allows some portability and mobility? And we all see that this is the way the world is turning, not only in the wide area, in the community itself, in the neighborhoods, in the public spaces, in our institutions, in our place of business, in our place of worship. I mean, technology is starting to abound everywhere you go, and then also at home. And if anybody hasn't looked at consumerism and what's going on with devices, we have all these wireless devices now. And so I have to laugh a little bit. Everybody says, well, you don't really need the bandwidth. But then look at everything, all the consumer products and all the services and all the other things that are being pushed out into the home, pushed out into the business, which are really then using and leveraging this bandwidth. So we see that we're building a technology infrastructure not just for today, but a technology infrastructure that will last and grow and scale with the needs of the neighborhoods and the community and help hopefully become an economic development tool. And we say that as a tool because it's really the community that is the engine. It's the community that becomes the participant, the engager, and the user of this infrastructure. We are providing the platform. We're providing the architecture. We're providing the support mechanism that helps make this a sustainable service infrastructure long term. So we applaud, the governor, understanding the project and what we're trying to do with the university and the communities and the difference that we're trying to make. We applaud the mayor in his inventiveness and an RFI to say, how do we do this in other areas and neighborhoods? And it's just by happenstance that this happens at almost the same time. We've been working with the university for about 4 or 5 months on these concepts and ideas, to kind of roll this out. And so we're encouraged that this isn't just going to be about these neighborhoods, it's going to be about the citywide. Now, we're not going to be able to do citywide. We're going to focus on the neighborhoods we're in. But this gives you a sense that we're on the right track, we're doing the right thing and moving in the right direction. So this is going to be something that we're going to share and through community discourse and some conversation, hopefully develop then. How do we use this infrastructure? How do we make this part of our daily lives? How do we make it part of the community? How do we improve the quality of life in our neighborhood through the use of this technology? Thank you.
Mark, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
That it's certainly on some people's mind. So how will the community get the benefit of the infrastructure? In other words, who's going to actually bring it to the last mile? Who's going to bring it to the consumer? Who's going to bill the consumer? Have you got to that point in thinking of the offering to consumers?
Great question, Drew. Thank you. And this is this all came on really coalesced very fast at the end. We've had the discussion. We're actually creating a special purpose enterprise, which means we're creating a local company to drive this, and we're going to be creating local jobs to be part of this and to really help take this off the ground. So this instance, of building this infrastructure is really going to be about the neighborhood and the community, about creating jobs in the community, about opening up opportunities. In that sense, that will be part of the community support mechanism. And so what we're hoping to do through, again, community dialogue, engagement, participation, is help create what we call a digital ecosystem. Creating the right resource, the capabilities, and the capacity then to really support this long term, not just, throw out the infrastructure, walk away and, wish you well. So we are, in essence, owners and operators here collectively as part of this. And Gigabit Squared is the operating engine that helps facilitate that, but we're really hoping to create the opportunity, the jobs locally, and create the right kind of talent resource that we can mentor, grow, and expand and leverage this. Folks like Pierre, who have been here for a long period of time and understand this, are technology savvy, understand the community needs, and that's the important part. That bridging between technology and community is the hardest thing to do, and that's what we're hoping to do through this program, is really develop that linkages.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Joseph Montgomery. I'm from the Bronzeville Visitor Information Center, and we've been kind of following the broadband initiative for a while. My question is you talked about broadband and you talked about it being a multi-tenant user platform, and in the past years the bandwidth. Most of the bandwidth has been taken up by the city of Chicago, with the police and the fire and all that stuff. So the majority of the bandwidth that was put out in the community was small compared to what other entities. Of course, they're more important. In this initiative that you're putting forth, would it increase the bandwidth that is available to the communities and to other organizations that want to be a tenant in that platform?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, because that I can add a little clarity to that. What we're able to do now, technology has really advanced over the last few years, and by putting fiber in the ground and making fiber available to all the properties in the area, and by having wireless connected to fiber, what we're really been able to do is to provide large-scale capacity to all end users. So we'll describe this as any to any. So whoever you're connected to, if they're on network with you, they're going to have access to the same bandwidth. And oh, by the way, the police are still going to have access to their bandwidth. And oh, by the way, schools are still going to have access to their bandwidth without interfering with your use and your application, your service. This is really the change in paradigm that we're implementing here. We call it hyperlocal. And the real need is that if you look at the big global, all the big carriers and the Googles of the world, they're all great folks, but they think of this as communities of interest globally. What we think about here is, we need to have that capability locally so that we can have those services. Because I'm going to tell you, 60 to 70% of the services most communities really use are local. Mm-hmm. But we just treat them as global enterprise services, which means you run through very thin pipes because everybody's aggregating their capacity. We're kind of turning that paradigm on its ear and saying, no, it's all about giving that capacity local. And yes, we're going to have big capacity going, global. But the truth is, we want to increase the adoption and use for those applications and then drive the cost of that way, way down. So it's like healthcare. I'll just give you one quick example here. As when you look at a doctor today, that doctor who has that application in his hospital doesn't have it at the clinic nor have it at home, but yes, has to consult and be part of that engagement wherever he is 7/24. So if you can give and extend that capability to him, he can provide better quality care by managing that from wherever he's at. And so if you're now a patient, critical care managed at home, you get access to that same level. That's why the assisted living center is a huge example of that, is when you can push that capacity in there, that's like being at the clinic. And that changes the whole paradigm. Now it's quality of life, quality of health, quality, all the other things that really affect the not everyday living.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't start out as a community technologist. I started out learning about technology through large systems, working with colleagues in the county on how to implement large technology systems, and got my project management teeth that way. And so when I was participated in Woodlawn's bottoms-up community planning process and developed our quality of life plan, and then all of a sudden had a role in helping to implement it, I looked around and saw that two big things we were missing from our plan was our technology plan and infrastructure, and it was also access to legal information. Those are just two huge deficits in our community plan. So I started a file in 2005 called Wire Woodlawn. And I've had ideas coming in and out of that file, people coming in and out of the office, until we figured out how to organize our community to attract the type of investment that we thought we needed to undergird that plan. And it's the same thing in the public sector and the private sector. If you have your strategy, you're going to need your technology strategy undergirding that. So trying to have a community plan without your technology infrastructure makes absolutely no sense. So we were very blessed in the Woodlawn community to have other visionaries who also understood this. Pierre Clark, who heads up the Chicago Digital Access Alliance, and Dr. Brazier, who's a former IBMer and who had a role in Woodlawn as an assistant pastor at the time. And so with that leadership, we were able to help to strengthen Woodlawn's position to be part of a community-based strategy. One of the things that helped our process along was the Promise Neighborhood movement. Many folks will be familiar with the Harlem Children's Zone and how they're able to transform outcomes for quality of life for children and families in Harlem. We sent several teams of our board members and volunteers and staff to Harlem to study that methodology and took a look at the role that real-time data intervention could help with outcomes. That was transformative for us to see how a community could have access to real-time data. I mean, used to that in business processes, but looking at a whole community that had real-time data so that you could understand at any given time that the student in the after-school program was making the targeted progress on math, mom made her appointment at the health clinic, and dad made his workforce development appointment. You could understand that about a family in real time and see whether or not the interventions you were doing were helping. So for a community who has those types of outcomes and goals in your quality of life planning, technology is really key. The data piece is really key, and so is the infrastructure. So we worked and tweaked our infrastructure on how we were going to implement our plan. So in Woodlawn, we've developed 4 pillars. One is on education, safety, health, and then community development. And each one of those pillars is taking a look at what type of next level applications can we run on broadband. And we're thinking about this and we're talking about this and we're engaging our thought leaders in those areas and helping them understand the importance of broadband. And we sort of have been working on this in 3 spheres. We have a very strong education network, so we had a working group looking at, the classroom of the future, professional development, how to maximize E-rate. We were also looking at the data piece that I just mentioned. And then our third piece was, really the backbone that's going to connect the community institutions, anchor institutions, and how we get fiber to the home. So out of that particular strategy, we started having a subset that said, okay, how are we going to get this broadband infrastructure here? And we really started taking a look at who would the natural allies be, who are the anchor institutions, and what other vehicles are there. And to that end, we were fortunate enough to be able to partner with POA, Preservation of Affordable Housing, and making sure that there was a broadband component in our choice application. Woodlawn was awarded the choice neighborhood designation. And that's one of the pillars that, we're driving to. As I mentioned before, we're following the Promised Neighborhood movement, and that movement believes in 21st century technology for students in the home and at school. And so those are additional markers that we're measuring our progress by. And then when we convened those stakeholders together, we were fortunate enough that our partners at the University of Chicago brought to the table this concept of GigU. Universities around the country were trying to figure out how to improve their buying power to be able to get gigabit level connectivity at the university and around the surrounding communities. And we're fortunate enough to be in the shadow of the university. So they brought that to the table. So we tried to figure out how do we leverage this for additional investment. The governor had his leadership in figuring out how to use some DCO dollars to get some of these things jump-started. And through traveling with the university to the GigU conferences and continuing to build partnerships and understand what other stakeholders were interested in community technology development, we're able to pull together the types of relationships. So when it was time for Gigabit Squared to decide, where they want to go, university said, come here. Woodlawn said, come here. And they said, okay, we'll look over there then. And so I think a part of what I'm saying is I want to encourage our community partners to look around you, understand what who your stakeholders are, understand what your community plan is, be strategic about planning your community, be strategic about how you're building your infrastructure. Because when you're prepared, then it's easier to attract the investment. And that's with any business. But communities have to look at themselves as a business, as an ecosystem, now a digital ecosystem. And because we had that bottoms-up planning process and were thoughtful about how we structured ourselves, we were in a better position to partner, in a better position to attract investment into our community. I want to just say one more thing about community engagement and what kind of opportunities this offers to partner with the community. There are many different ways to do community engagement. I'm a traditional community organizer, but community organizers say there are 2 kinds of power: organized money and organized people. And of course, us modern day community organizers would say, and organized information. And that's the arena that we're in. And so to all of our community partners who are tuning in, that's what we have to be about. And we have to have that infrastructure so that we can have that organized information to make sure that we're headed where we're going to go. And it's good to see that our partners understand the role that communities can play, understand the value of our buying power and the value of what we have to bring to the table. And we look forward to working with our community partners and with private sector partnerships, the public sector partnerships, as we move forward in this new economy.
So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I thought a little bit as I was listening to the other speakers about what I'd say. Sometimes when I'm in the room, and this tells my age, they sort of say, as Charles Benton likes to say, I'm the historian. You know, I sort of bring the historical perspective of the work that we've been doing. And so when I see Charles Benton, who has created his own legacy with the Benton Foundation, I remember I remember 1995, first of all, when I read all the material that the Benton Foundation put out that said that nonprofits would lead the way in digital, bridging the digital divide and making sure that residents got connected to that. And so that informed a lot of work that we did in the next 17 years with CTCNet and a lot of the other things that we did. And then I remember coming forward to 2006, 11 years later, and actually meeting the individual whose name was on all the books that I had read in the 1990s at Laura Lane's office when we actually talked about community networks, and the Chicago Digital Access Alliance really was formed in that room with Debbie Strauss, who's here, and Charles Benton, and Ernie and Mike Miranda and Lowry Taylor. So we've been working at this a while, and I think that history needs to be shared as we move forward into the phase that we're moving into now, which is very exciting for all communities that we deal with. But I also have to say, Bruce Montgomery, that Bruce has been the champion and the chronicler in his TV show of all of the history that we've had in this work. Debbie Strauss, who was the second and most important director of the Information Technology Resource Center, which is now called Lumity since 1984. You were at the table. And so, again, I think it's important that we recognize who's in the room. I'm always a believer of saying to people, let's see who's in the room, okay? So that when I look at Norm and his brother, and I understand that Norman Montgomery 4 years ago, mapped the entire South Side and put together a plan for a wireless network that covered the South Side, a copy of which I have, okay? Then
Don't let nobody see that yet.
No, well, I got my copy. I still got it, okay? Then I understand that it's not just, here, you look at the building, sometimes you don't see the foundation, what keeps the building standing and what everything else is built on. So I think it's important to take a couple of minutes, to talk about that and to recognize that, all right? Now, here we are in 2012. We're 25th in the world in broadband adoption. What we're talking about here in the United States, the Japanese, the Germans, and others have already enjoyed for years, and that's high speed, almost gigabit speed connectivity. So when Bruce Montgomery says we're playing catch up, we understand that, don't we, Bruce? We understand where we are, okay? And so it's important that we learn and understand where we are and what we have to do to catch up with everybody else, okay, that's already enjoying this. But that said, it's important to also say that this initiative here in this community in Chicago and in Woodlawn on the South Side is breaking ground, because this is the urban nexus of the gigabit speed movement, okay? This is what's coming. This is where we are. And we're proud to say that the governor and others who have looked at what we've proposed to do and what has been proposed by Gigabit Squared to do have decided that Woodlawn and the South Side is where it's going to happen. So that's very important, Norman. That's very important for us, okay, as the historians and the people who have worked at this for a long time, to understand that our work came to this point, that we're here, okay? So there's no more excuses. There's no more, hey, can it be done? Because we're here. The governor has said that he believes it can be done, and we think that we're going to prove him right. We're not going to believe the Sun Times when they say that they wrote that article that said that all of this is sort of didn't happen in other cities. This is not other cities. This is Chicago. This is the South Side. We're going to make it happen. Okay. So how do we do that? We do that by engaging residents, engaging our technical people, engaging our community organizers, our financial people, all the people who share in the vision that we're talking about. Okay. So it's an opportunity that we have to bring all that together. And I would say that I'm very excited personally about that opportunity, Ernie. I'm very excited for us on the South Side. I'm excited for the city because let's face it, if we do it here and we show it can be done here, then you don't think the other 70-some communities are going to just sit back, right? They're going to want it there too, okay? And so we're here to show that that can be done. And so as we look at Brad House, right, who's our technical advisor and guru, and we look at Drew Clark, who brings a wealth of experience from starting two businesses that I follow in DC all the time, and now here as the executive director of the Partnership for Connected Illinois. And when I look at Will Towns, who has a real estate background and who has a technology and community development background and who is representing the university here, and as I look at my esteemed partner, Laura Lane, who I consider the best partner I've ever had in this work, and we sat down at a coffee shop in Woodlawn called Robust and said, we're going to make this thing happen. And here we are. We made it happen. Okay. And we look at Bob Jennings and Mark Ansbury, who we met in March at the Gig U conference in Rosemont in the speed dating, as Laura likes to call it, round. And Claire Jelenkova, who was our great partner at the University of Chicago, who brought us all together and said, we can make this happen. And when I look at John Homer, who is representing Mobile Citizen, who represents my friend John Schwartz, and we talked about this, John and I, in 1998. Okay, so here we are, 14 years later. All right, so there's a history of this, but then there's the future of this. And yesterday's announcement was just the end of the beginning. We got a lot of work to do. Okay, and I think we got the team. I think we've got the will. I think we've got the spirit, and we're up for the challenge. Thanks.
All right. All right.
So I have the esteemed pleasure of following Pierre, which is always a pleasure and a challenge. But again, my name is William Towns. I'm from the University of Chicago's Office of Civic Engagement. And we really are happy to play a role in this collaborative effort to bring high-speed, gigabit speed to the Mid-South. I'll try not to shed any light where there's no darkness. A lot of people have covered a lot of the innovations and things that can happen. But I really want to focus in on a couple of points. One being that we've really got to start looking at broadband connectivity in these communities as the necessity that it is. If you can imagine, if we could, at a snap of a finger, take away all of our public transportation systems from a community, how disconnected the community would be, how hard it would be for people to get to work, how hard it would be for people to get to school and sort of do the daily things that they need in their life. We're at a point now where broadband and digital connectivity is that crucial to our communities. How we can get our people connected, how we can get them the information and the knowledge that they need. You know, I have no doubt that within the communities in this Mid-South where we're working to implement this initiative, there are people who will be working together and collaboratively to come up with great organizations, great communities and futures. I know our kids in our Mid-South communities have the capabilities to do that. And by giving them this tool, as we've referred to it today, will allow them to reach their full potential, allow them to come up with ideas. I mean, we have to remember, huge companies, technology companies were created with two people meeting at coffee shops, people meeting in a garage, tinkering around with a few wires and things like that. spawned huge companies that have changed people's lives, not only just in the community where it started, but around the world. And we at the university feel proud to be able to support this idea. I think also that the technology that we're rolling out is not sort of a drip and drab technology. We're making huge leaps forward. We're not going to slowly increase the speed and sort of get it to a point, charging each more as we go and sort of getting people going. This is really a huge leap forward that will allow huge amounts of information to be transferred. It will allow people to have huge impacts on their lives and communications and things. And as we see technology truly infiltrate homes, the advancement of smartphones, near frequency technologies, things like that, that allow information to be not only created but used in new ways. You know, I'm looking at a point where people walk by restaurants and stores and pick up information on what's going on inside the store right from their phone just by walking by. I'm talking about information on students here in the Mid-South, talking with kids in Korea, kids in China, kids in Japan, Europe, you know, exchanging ideas, learning information and things like that from people all across the country and the world. And it is incredibly inspiring to be a part of that. The other thing I'm proud of is this is going on in the Mid-South. This could have happened anywhere in Chicago, North Side, West Side, wherever, but to bring this to the Mid-South, to recognize the partnerships and collaborations that are going on in the Mid-South, I think it is truly special. And I, you know, again, applaud the governor for recognizing that. But as Pierre said, these aren't things that when they came out with an application, someone said, wow, we ought to apply for this. This has been something that has been in the works for a very long time. And people have taken painstaking process of really analyzing what this is really going to mean. And again, you know, we're talking about improving education. We're talking about improving health. We're talking about public safety. And I can't even imagine once this is implemented, the things that will be coming forward from these ideas. You know, I have a 5 and 4-year-old daughter who doesn't know what a typewriter is, never seen a record, doesn't know what a cassette tape is. When I look at the implementation of this gigabit speed, what will our young kids in this community not know because of the innovations that will be able to be created from the implementation of this system? And it is very exciting. And, you know, we feel at the university that engaging our community, engaging our partners is the proper way to go. This is a system in which we have partnerships that are on the ground, that we're really trying to bring people together to the table systematically to really look at this to make sure we're not overseeing anything. And we're happy to play a role in that and really be a part of that partnership. And again, as we look as a higher education institution, we know the importance of research, we know the importance of information, and we know the importance that that can have on the impact of the kids and the people in our communities. And we look forward to moving this project forward. We're excited about the opportunities and things that will come forth from this. And we really are excited and looking forward to the innovations and things that we're not even quite thinking about yet that will roll out from this development. And that is the reason why, you know, we felt it was important that once the partnerships and things were formed, that we felt it was important for us to step up and be a part of this initiative and to give support where we can. We are behind this 100% and want to make sure that the Mid-South, the entire Mid-South, gets the technology and the boost that it needs, has the access to high speed, and really looking at how this can affect our commercial corridors, how can it affect and improve our crime statistics, and sort of looking at how we can prevent safety prevention, things like that, and really support the next generation of kids that are going to be coming out of these neighborhoods and into our higher education institutions, hopefully all around the country and the world, and have real impact. And at that, I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
Hello, folks. For you that might not know me, my name is Brad Housewright, and I'm the E-Team Director for Broadband Illinois Partnership for Connected Illinois. And when we were talking about the panelists and we were talking about, how we wanted to really value the impact of what's happened over the last couple of days, there's just one huge word that sticks. Actually, there's a couple, but one is commitment. I mean, when I hear Laura Lane talk about 2005, I can remember being from Southern Illinois, kind of starting that process in 2005 as well. So we can tell it takes a long time, a lot of perseverance, a lot of commitment in order to keep the efforts moving forward. But the collaboration that's happened to be able to get all of these organizations, think about it 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, there was some of this collaboration that goes on, but there wasn't a really commonality. This little thing called broadband, which has now really started to morph into the commonality that we all continue to reach and strive towards to make available to the citizens of the state of Illinois. And so the mission that we have as Broadband Illinois as being one of those conveners of the stakeholders and being one of the drivers in terms of collaboration of where we get the pleasure of working with folks like, Gigabit Squared and Laura and Pierre, and in terms of, Woodlawn and the other organizations, and certainly our educational facilities like University of Chicago. When first started having conversations with Laura and Pierre, I really got excited because this really begins to take on a vision of a model that Charles Benton and Mr. Montgomery and Drew Clark and I we keep talking about. We really need something that begins to resemble a model, and then that way we can replicate the model in and throughout Illinois. So in having those conversations with Laura and Pierre, of course, Pierre and I kind of get sidetracked with the whole technology side of this thing a little bit because we're a couple of geeks. But aside from that, understanding the vision that Laura and Pierre were painting, where you had public safety and what you basically had all the elements of a community that would come together on one common platform, and that was a broadband platform. And so again, that's really what we strive to do as being PCI, is to drive that platform so we can continue to cultivate the opportunities that you folks are really in the middle of right now. And so working with Gigabit Squared within the communities of Woodlawn and the Hyde Park and the other 7 that are involved in that, and understanding the learning curve and how we really begin, to implement all the possibilities that begin to come. There are things that no one has even thought about yet as we move forward to this. The technologies Mr. Towns starts talking about. I have 20 and 22-year-old children that don't know what an 8-track tape is. So, I morphed 20 years on him and still look at that. And so I'm thinking, what's going to come to the table that we don't even know what's happening yet? But the one commonality is broadband. The one thing that Gigabit Squared said is that this is an open access. It allows the availability for those entrepreneurs, those telcos, the other organizations which can impact this broadband to bring those opportunities to bear for entrepreneurs and the other folks that are on that. So I know as Broadband Illinois and our organization, we're truly excited about the opportunity and how we learn from this, and then how we're able to turn this into a model that we can quantify as being one that we can charge for the rest of the state. Because the governor's laid out the challenge. We have now just taken the first step to adopt the challenge. I'm waiting to stick the flag in the end of the run of which we say we have completed the challenge. And so I really feel like that's where PCI will help to drive and conquer and certainly help to keep the commitment of what's gone on here today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much to each of our panelists. Okay, so now we're entering the next phase of our discussion here. We do have many people on the webinar. We're very grateful that you've been here with us. I'd like to do three things in the next, we have about an hour where we can continue this discussion. The first is to thank the Urban League, and I neglected to thank them at the start for offering us this wonderful space here to have this event here on the South Side. I understand that Sherry Runner will be coming down, and we'd like to invite her to say a few words when she gets here. But without further ado, I did want to thank her for the use of this space, and we certainly hope to continue to have events here in the future. And Urban League, of course, plays a vital role in the community. And one of the key things that we haven't talked a lot about here, and maybe we'll talk more about it today, but certainly in the future, is making sure we engage the network with the uses of the network, making sure that individuals have the training, the skills they need. And obviously, the Urban League is a great provider of those skills and resources. I see at least two areas that we want to talk about, and it may be best if we open it up to those who have been patient online first. The first is talking about the specifics of this project here on the South Side. Questions that are just leaping out of my mind is, what are the current options that businesses and the university and other anchor institutions have? How will this change the options available to them? How soon will it change those options available to them? With regard to businesses and home residences, are we talking about fiber to the home? Who's going to do those connections? How soon will they do those connections? When will the opportunity be available? How soon will it be available? Those are some of the questions that I certainly would like us to tease out as we open the floor up. And then perhaps the next we could take about a half an hour on that, and then the second half hour we could move more generically to Chicago, to what this says to the city, to what lessons the city can learn. We do know we do have some individuals on our webinar from the city. We welcome their contribution and engagement, because we know there's a very active request for information going on right now, and we want to be able to, I guess, take the first on-the-ground player here, the first recipient of the Gigabit Challenge, and be able to see what that means. So, as I say, we'll interrupt for our Urban League hosts when they arrive. But until then, let's go ahead and open it up to our webinar audience and to see if anyone would like to raise your hand to ask any questions. We'll also kind of open the floor up to our audience and to our panelists here to come to the mic and speak. So again, we appreciate those on our remote line who have been listening. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question to ask of any of our panelists. Do we have anyone online? Okay, we do have one question here. Go ahead and can we unmute and hear?
Mike Smeltzer, did you have a question you wanted to ask? You're unmuted if you'd like to ask one.
I'd just like to say hi to everybody. And no.
Okay, thank you. You kind of feedback there, so if you want to repeat or type in, and we can go ahead and we can say your comment out loud. Okay.
Great. We're looking forward to anyone from the remote audience who'd like to type in their question, and we can read it back here. We're trying to do the virtual physical meeting space, so appreciate your patience. Okay, we had a question right here.
Sure. We finally.
Could you go ahead and say identify yourself?
My name is Norman Montgomery, and I'm interested in hearing whether or not we're going to be talking about offering synchronous service.
The question was, will there be synchronous service?
The answer to that is yes. Okay. The real way, when we talked, and I mentioned it earlier, the hyperlocal aspect of this is about creating a community enterprise in a way. And this is about connecting everyone to everyone in an effective way. And when we talk about it, it's two-way communications, which means that your upstream has to be able to equal your downstream. It's a very different strategy. The technology we're deploying, within the community, which is fiber to the home, is even more advanced than what we typically consider today in GPON. We're deploying something called WDM-PON. And in that, what we're providing is a gigabit to gigabit kind of service interconnectivity capability. And then on the wireless side, what we're doing is injecting gigabit into the wireless distribution, using that fiber as a framework for doing that. On the wireless, you won't have a gigabit access, but you'll be able to connect what we call super Wi-Fi zones that have that 400, 500 megabit kind of access capability. Yes, sir.
Thanks. Are there other questions? You have a question, Ed? Oh, yes.
I'm interested, Paula Robinson. I'm interested in, first of all, I want to speak for a little bit so we can get you in the microphone. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Laura and Pierre for job well done. We keep looking at this stuff around the country and going, what is going on with Chicago? So thanks for getting us on the map. The next question is basically about whether or not you've had some opportunity to think through with the civic engagement and the outreach, how these community partners such as ourselves can engage. And I guess I'm wondering, obviously the focus seems to be, in terms of housing and then certainly business. But I'm hoping that as we travel with this gigabit speed, that we can also maybe have a couple of different trains on the track. I mean, I think that this is very much a prototype that we are demonstrating, and I just think that it would be really exciting to see a number of different things happening. While the Mid-South has these 9 different communities, I think each one has looked at, as you guys suggested, its own assets and opportunities to say, hey, this is what's going to really move us ahead. This is what's really going to resonate because this is what we've been working on for the last 15 years as well. And so I think that in the spirit of this, I'm hoping that there is almost a function like an intermediary type of function. I looked at the one of the things that Derek Douglas was involved with now at U of C with the social innovation funds. There was a process where you said, well, here are these intermediaries, and we're kind of looking at a number of different things that fit within these guidelines, and we're going to be, kind of monitoring, reporting back, sharing. Hey, this is working here. Let's change here. I mean, all the things that we keep talking about in technology as it relates to pivot and tilt and sticky and traction, so that we're also looking at ourselves that way. And so I'm just really delighted. The first sign of this is that this was announced yesterday, and the next day you're having this meeting. So that's really encouraging me to say that this is, we're ready to move at this gigabit speed too. So, and I kind of put this back to you, Drew, that, I think that there is a role for PCI in this. And part of this would be just what's been going on with these webinars, the level of sharing, even in terms of meetings, that you're seeing that people want to be engaged in meetings, contribute to thought, etc. So I'm interested in the engagement. I don't know really who to direct the question to.
I'll start off.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a great question. I appreciate your enthusiasm for this kind of meeting here that we're having today. I would say 2 things. First of all, we really want to make sure that all of the applicants for gigabit communities, besides those winners, those who are part of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities Eliminate the Digital Divide Fund, those who applied for the Broadband Innovation Fund that we announced last month, we want to make sure those people continue to dialogue, okay? And this could be a launching off point, and we will have more meetings that will be further launching off points for those engagements. So we absolutely will continue to be a part of that discussion. I don't quite know if you're asking this, but in terms of being a provider, and that's not in our wheelhouse as an organization, as a nonprofit at this point in time. What we heard right now from Mark and from Bob is that this is an open network. So I'd love to hear from any providers on the webinar or in the room about how they want to get involved in this network, or what process and plans you already have for making sure that the last mile connections can be had. Now, did you just raise your hand? Did you want to add something to Pierre?
I did.
Great.
Thanks so much, Drew. I did want to state to Paula, for the record, that the civic engagement and engagement of the 9 communities will be very high in this process. We will ensure that, and we know that you, in particular, with your organizations and the history that you've had over the last 2 decades in engagement on the South Side and the Mid-South community, will hold us accountable to that. So, and we want you to do that, A. And B, we've been assured in our conversations with Gigabit Squared and with our Woodlawn network and our larger network around the South Side, Dr. Brazier being in Woodlawn, and we've had a lot of communications with folks in the other 8 communities, and as well as our communication with PCI and their team and people, that the community engagement in this process will be very, very high. And I think, and not only in terms of just being in the room, I'm talking about being at the table, being part of the development, being part of the rollout, and so forth. And I know that we're very lucky to have Bernie Sanders as our E-team leader in Chicago. He knows us, we know him, and so that's going to be a key element, a key relationship that's going to make sure that works.
One idea that I wanted to throw out there that came to me as we were talking is that the model that the universities use to try to bring and attract.
Laura, is the microphone on there?
The model, here you go.
Oh, man, what do you want?
The model that the universities use and give you is something that we as community stakeholders should take a look at. Because what they did is, because they had Larry Levin from the FCC and the National Broadband Project in the room, they were able to attract the providers to the table with innovative ideas. And I think one of the things that Broadband Illinois and PCI can do is help foster that type of leadership, where we can bring all the innovators in the room. And literally the way that we met up with our colleagues at Gigabit Squared was the speed dating, where we knew what our goals were for our projects around the university. They knew what their goals were, and you had an opportunity to say, hey, we want to talk to you, you, and you, and let's see if there's some synergy and vision. Let's see if there's some synergy. And of course, Gigabit Squared's focus on digital economic development rang very true to a Southside cohort. So I think we can take a look at not just our traditional community engagement and outreach, but let's talk about creating the industry and creating and attracting the developers and the opportunities for developing the next level applications. One of the conversations we've had with the city and with Smart Communities was 1871 South. So many of you are familiar with 1871 at Merchandise Mart, where they're doing a lot of innovations in applications development. And we talked about having that on the south side so we can spur innovation and development here. And so I think we're going to have to look at community engagement a little differently. And I'm going to pass it over to Gigabit Square because they thought about this. They have, brought on a strong community engagement person on their team. But we also have to think about what's going to work best for Mid-South.
Thank you, Lauren. So I just wanted to maybe, I love the image of the rail image because that's the perfect analogy, because each of the neighborhoods comes with different parts of this. They're bringing it to the whole. and it's like the analogy of the railroad is very apt because there's long haul rail just like there's long haul fiber, but it all goes off into short line rails and actually goes to allow us to communities. And your idea of those communities and those neighborhoods are they bring different things to the table and they bring different things as a part of this. So we are, as Gigabit Squared, are looking. Okay, no, we're really looking to you as leaders in the communities to be able to come to us and bring those other participants, those other ideas, and that's part of the process. And Melanie Moody, who some of you have met at Gigabit Squared, is our Chief Operating Officer, but also our community engagement person. She will be here with me over the next couple months, working with you to be able to bring those ideas to the table. The other thing that we have to do is we want to not be proud and just think, well, we know everything here, because there are best practices out there that we can bring to the Mid-South that I think will be very powerful. And I'll give you an example. I'm familiar because I serve on as the president-elect of the National Council for Public-Private Partnership in the Washington, D.C. area. And one of the members of our executive committee is from the state of Wyoming. And he's the economic development director, and he was telling me a story about a company there that is doing something that's really innovative that could literally, this idea could be brought to the south side of Chicago. That company went and just had this aha moment, this brainchild action, and said, we have a lot of teachers, and Wyoming is a very sparsely populated state. We have a lot of teachers here that maybe are unemployed or underemployed. And this company came up with this idea, said, we want to take those teachers that are not teaching full time, and rather than have them be substitute teachers or find community folks that have certain kind of skills as an educator, and we want to have them teach English as a second language to kids in China. But it only worked because that community had a high-speed broadband network. They had a fiber optic network in this community. And this company literally located there because of that, built this center, and now they just expanded it through the help of, kind of a public-private partnership. And now they're teaching overnight, they're teaching kids in China. And when you were talking about, the Korea example, I mean, this is a way of doing things that are really impactful. It's back to your rail analogy. It goes out across the landscape, but it really comes back to a local. Mark's talking about hyperlocal, but it's a way of driving that kind of hyperlocal exchange. So we're excited to engage. I love that analogy because it really, I think, fits what we're looking to do here. Everyone brings, the 9 neighborhoods all bring something a little bit different, and I think those differences are going to be able to be used and utilized across the whole Mid-South.
Bob, what was the name of the person who you just mentioned on your team?
And her name is Melanie Moody, and she's the COO of Gigabit Squared.
Please, go ahead, Wade.
And again, with the universities involved in our commitment to support through some funding of this effort, really is the partnership effort. And the 9 communities of the Mid-South, as we're calling it, in order for this to be successful, the Mid-South, and each of the people, constituents from the community, need to be a part of this process. Myself from the university will be the lead representative, so I will be out in these communities working with Woodlawn, working with Gigabit Squared to ensure that not only are we hosting meetings, but we're actually getting feedback from the constituents, looking at each of those individual concerns and how we can implement a process that incorporates those ideas into the flow and deployment of the gigabit speed. And so it is front and foremost on our minds that this process, in order for it to be successful, must get acceptance from the community, must have community input, and then as a team, work towards a goal of implementing and deploying these services.
Great. We've got 2 questions online. I've seen 2 questions out here. So let's go with these 2 first, and then I have 2, maybe 3 more questions here. From Antoine Wallace, congrats on the award. Is this award to present supply-side incentives for infrastructure build-out, co-location, mesh network, fiber to the home? It would be helpful to appreciate early consideration and planning to link these efforts, demand-side policies, models, and programs. pricing, workforce development, telehealth, speed, security, and intranet interoperability. Would anyone like to tackle that one?
Say yes.
Yes. That's a mouthful. And I guess the best way to sort of describe that is that we're really creating, it's a petri dish. It's a real opportunity to grow something new and innovative and creative. And part of this is to describe the needs and the demand in the community in such a way that the infrastructure and services support that. And so though we talk about open access, part of what we're really doing is creating those local community applications and services. So we are creating a service provider model. And we encourage other people to participate and engage in that. And we don't really have the answer. We don't know what that's going to look like at the end. We know we're going to have a foundation infrastructure to make it work. We want to create these big pipes and these big connective gateways. We have all kinds of other things to worry about with public safety and security because we want to promote those kinds of services. So there's going to be what we'll call some traditional networking, and there's going to be a lot of non-traditional networking that's going to occur as part of this community collaboration. And that's what we're most excited about.
Mark, how soon can someone expect this to get to their home or their business in terms of a partner who can take it to the last mile?
Well, we are actually taking it to the last mile. I mean, that's part of what this grant was. The grant was
you'll be billing the customer.
We are building the infrastructure, billing, customer service management, in collaboration with creating the localized organization and support and customer service and all the things that need to happen as part of this. So this is what we said is we're going to be creating local jobs as part of the environment of what we're creating. So we are going to be delivering. One of the things we learned, and I want to describe this too, is we say open access, but I'm going to tell you from lessons learned, and if you've looked at open networks and open access in the U.S., it doesn't really do real well. And the reason it doesn't do real well because they aren't delivering the services themselves. We want to inspire others to do better than us. We want to be good. We want to be the best. But if others are better than us and they can deliver services on that network as an open access network, by all means, let them deliver. That is the model of open access that we want to work. Inspire the highest quality, the best service that can be delivered at the right kinds of pricing. So in this case, we are, as a community, to be sustainable, we have to be a provider. As a community, we have to be open. As a community, we have to allow innovation and creativity. And that's where the great partnership with the university and the community neighborhoods really becomes important to us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Add some good light. There was some reference to an economic development process that will spur job creation and business growth. Would the speakers please discuss this process and how it will be applied during this project? Here.
Thank you. I'd like to address that particular point by saying that we've given a lot of thought to not only how many jobs can be created by the process of developing the network, but all of the ancillary jobs that can be created because the network is in existence. And so I think we have to look long term at the kinds of jobs that will be created because the capacity for new development will be enhanced by the network's development. So, we're looking at jobs in terms of network engineer, network installer. In fact, in Woodlawn, we've applied to the city for a grant to do training to develop network engineers and network installers. And we're happy to have one of our partners who is actually working in Champaign, who's going to not only be supervising that training, but is going to hire some of those people as we get them trained. So we do have that as an end result. And also we're looking at doing training to help people get involved in the Network Operations Center of Cisco, which got involved with us early on, has given us some equipment, some Cisco equipment, so that we can start training people with the Cisco designation. And so Cisco, if you're a tech, you know that Cisco designation, CCIE, is the highest level designation you can have as a network engineer. And those people make a lot of money, okay? So we want to help our residents get that opportunity. But there's going to be many, many other tech-related jobs and jobs that are created because the network is in place. And so we're very focused on that, and that's a key outcome.
That's dynamite. Excellent. Okay, we had do you still have a question?
You asked if there were service providers in the room. I represent one.
Okay.
My name is Shane Hampton. I represent a company called Business Only Broadband. We call our company Bob for short. And
we're going to get along really well.
Yeah. So the employees that I work with and co-founded, we're all stakeholders in the company. So it sounds like it's the same culture as Gigabit Squared. I took a lot of notes, but our company started in 2005, and we really have the same issues that you're described on this panel and in this program that you're talking about. We use fixed wireless, the type that backhauls 4G LTE services from the towers. We use fixed wireless synchronous, Mr. Montgomery, for 100 megabit, 200 megabit, 800 megabit, a gigabit speed to our end users. We found it very reliable, very affordable, and our clients love it because it gets there, sometimes years before fiber can get there, even in our city or in this Collar County. So I think my feedback would be, I think you're going to have a lot of success using fixed wireless in bridging either to those Wi-Fi access points, or if you do get 4G LTE carriers to come in, they want that type of backhaul. They're already using it in their networks. And the fiber as a middle mile, and ultimately you can get it in the last mile, that's a much better solution, gives you a lot more upside, but also in some of your anchor institutions like the university where we serve, like La Rabida Hospital where we serve, like the planetarium where we serve, just trying to pick some south side locations that are anchor institutions. They like fixed wireless because if the buried utilities are compromised, it gives them an alternative path. So I think, speaking of ourselves, we've grown from zero. I mean, we bootstrapped our company 5 years ago, and we're profitable and cash flow positive, and we've hired lots of employees, 4 or 5 of them from these 9 neighborhoods, and we'd like to hire a lot more. So I'm really asking, how would I plug into you guys either now or short term in the future to help and to mutually benefit as a service provider and as the community organization to deliver services to where they need to be delivered: home, business, parks, everywhere.
You want to add on to that? It's great to get this out here. I turned it off.
Well, let me just first say the dialogue started. So now we know who you are, and there's a conversation to be had. And so we need to sit down and talk and start some planning process, just like we're doing with the community hall. So we encourage that kind of discussion. We look forward to working with you.
Thank
you. I'm Leighton Olson, I'm an attorney in Chicago, and I came here in '67 to '71. Worked on the South Side. Was the head of the legal services office in Woodlawn since '97. I was involved with far South Chicago, South Cook County, Northwest Indiana on telecommunications and economic development. I got to work with questions and worked with PCI and just about a lot of the other people here. 4 questions: are you going to have tech expos or things like that going out to community fairs all over the place? Number 1, apply the whole season next year. Second, how are you working with community college systems, and what are the other 7 neighborhoods, and could they help host community assemblies, with a lot of gloss? And maybe there might be 8 to 12 areas like this around the city that could be modeled. And then lastly, how are you working with the federal initiatives, saying all the federal agencies and all their properties need to be, connected wire? Are there federal properties around here that plug into this kind of activity?
Thank you, Leighton. And I just want to say I didn't acknowledge Leighton before. We've been working together on this stuff since '97, right, Leighton? Okay. That's Chicago State. That's right. So first of all, we definitely plan to have many of the fairs and the other events that you mentioned. I want to put in a plug for our Digital Excellence Conference, which is going to happen November 10th at the Logan Center for the Arts, which is a very beautiful building on the campus of the University of Chicago. So Thanks to Sharon Azul for
Why don't you
working it.
repeat that date? Let's get this down.
Yes, it's November 10th, Saturday, 8 to 5, at the Logan Center for the Arts, 915 East on 60th Street. And we're working with the Office of Civic Engagement and Network of Woodlawn and others to do this conference. It'll be our second, Charles. We didn't do it last year, but we're doing it in 2012. And we'll have a lot of key people from this work here in Chicago and around the country. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach. I think that Layton's idea of these tech fairs and congresses, we picked up on the idea of doing neighborhood technology congresses. So those will be in the affected communities. And we want to do as much engagement and outreach as possible to let people know this is coming, what they can expect, and how they can be involved. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Question here, and then we'll get a question here.
Yes, my name is Joseph Montgomery. I'm from the Bronzeville Visitor Information Center. And during your presentation, you alluded to 9 communities. As far as I know, I've only heard the Woodlawn community. Is Bronzeville a part of those 9 communities?
Yes.
Okay, so now were they pre-selected? I mean, can other communities be added on in the process, or are you just going to stick with those 9 communities?
Name them again.
Didn't name them.
The 9 communities, for everybody's information, are Douglas, Grand Boulevard, Kenwood, Oakland, and that's what we call Bronzeville. Okay. And then there's Woodlawn, South Shore, Grand Crossing, Hyde Park, and Washington Park. Those are the 9.
And just as a little framing around that, when we first did this and working with the University of Chicago, we wanted really create a boundary run program that we could implement. And in the first step, to build all 9 neighborhoods is a very expensive proposition.
Yes.
And we had our initial funding basically gives us the ability to really address the wireless sort of infrastructure in the 9 neighborhoods, but fiber 3 neighborhoods, so our 4 neighborhoods. So our initial focus is Kenwood, Hyde Park, Woodland, and Washington in the first phase, but we are going to grow that. That's just sort of the phase 1 of the initial fiber deployment. We'll have fiber backbone capability. We'll do some other things, and we'll be bringing some additional capital in from other sources to help facilitate that expansion.
Have one more.
Quick follow-up, sure,
Okay.
sure.
As an organization that's been following the broadband initiative, we have a plan, and that we've been working on. So, in order to implement that plan, should we work through the Gigabit Squared, or should we just continue on doing our own outreach and notifying people about what we're doing? I mean, what I'm saying is looking for, is there somebody we should work with in order to get our plan out there?
So we are working, and of course Tom is really helping us out with the university side of that equation in the neighborhood. So we are going to have lots of other community dialogues, but I mean specifically here, just like we just talked about with other providers, if there's a specific dialogue that you want to have, we encourage you to bring that right to us. Tom can be a great liaison.
William.
Huh?
Town.
I'm
sorry. What am I doing? I'm already getting in trouble.
I'm already getting in trouble here. But in any case, I mean, the dialogue here can start at that level. It can start with us, Melanie Moody, who's going to be sort of our local engagement person, and then ultimately we're going to be hiring some folks in the community here as well.
Thank you.
And I also wanted to say from a PCI perspective that we'd be happy to help Ernie. This is his backyard. We really want to stay engaged with the neighborhoods and the local efforts and convening stakeholders. We work very closely with Laura and Pierre. I know that resources sometimes get shy, so especially when you're working on big projects and big efforts. So we certainly don't want you to go unnoticed, and we don't want the opportunity for some of those things that you're working on to slip away. So please reach out to Ernie or myself and let us help you continue to organize that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to address the community engagement issue from the standpoint of the work that the Woodlawn Broadband Expansion Partnership has done in Woodlawn, and by extension, the work that we're reaching out to do in the other communities. And one of the reasons that we have the partnership, and one of the reasons that we're reaching out, we've done the stakeholder engagement in Woodlawn and beyond, is that we want to ensure as a part of this partnership that everything that we want to see happen, the plans that we know you've had and I've been a part of for those years, are implemented as we roll this out. So there's PCI, there's Gigabit Squared, who is the lead and the builder, and then there's the community stakeholder partnership. Okay, that includes not only Woodlawn but the other 8 communities as well. And as I've shared with you, we've reached out to people in those other communities. Okay, so we need, and then let's not forget the university, which specifically through the Office of Civic Engagement, Will Towns, will be engaging those communities as well. Okay?
Okay.
I just wanted to touch on one of Layton's questions that we didn't really close out, which was city colleges. So when we were putting together our ideas for the use cases, how can you use high-speed broadband in the 4 areas that I mentioned before: education, healthcare, safety, and civic, community development. We brought our local city college to the table. They happen to have a recent grant for doing robotics, training with young people, and they're willing to help us leverage that grant. And so we're very lucky that we have some professors and colleges nearby who are going to be adaptable to working with us both in the job training piece, but also partnering. And that opportunity obviously exists everywhere with our city colleges systems throughout the state. There's an opportunity for that kind of partnership. So Layton, we have brought them to the table, and we're already linking up with one grant, and we hope to apply for others. And because we are a choice neighborhood, we can tap into some other federal dollars as well to support both the digital divide side and and then the infrastructure side.
And I just want to address real quick the Mid-South communities, or the 9 as it's been referred here. We want to make sure that we have a system in place that collects all of the information in an orderly manner. And so that's something we're going to have to discuss so that we can keep sort of our database or think tank of ideas sort of orderly and in fashion. And so we want to make sure that we get out the process in which that's going to take place, so that people know who to get the information to ensure that it gets in to be a part of the general discussion and rollout of the process. And so we want to make sure we're in 9 communities. We got 9, communities responding, that they're equally being weighed as for their ideas and such. And we want to make sure that we have a system that takes that into account. And my role and the university is to really look at how we could do that and ensure that we get the voices of all the people that are concerned.
Thank you.
And that is actually a key role that Broadband Illinois can help serve in as well. Our Broadband Illinois website already has information by geography at the county level, but we're actively constructing at the neighborhood level in Chicago. So we'll be able to have resource pages for each of these 9 neighborhoods, indeed all 77 Chicago neighborhoods, that can help facilitate this process. Okay, we have a question from Charles Ben.
Really glad to be here, and wonderful to hear all these comments. I'd like to talk a little about, or ask a question about planning and resources. As I understand it, Mark, you have about $9 million available now from investment partners from the university and from the state. As far as I know, the city has not made any commitments at all. We need to talk about that briefly. Because obviously this is part of the city, and we need city involvement. I'm sure you're in favor of that, but let's come to that in a minute. the planning for it, you can't do it all at once. You have to start somewhere. And I'm wondering if your thought for the 9 communities is to make an overall plan, but then allocate the resources you have for fulfilling part of that plan. So there would be a plan that might attract additional funding, but you would commit to certain areas that are ready and right from the standpoint of the community, and perhaps other dark fiber and other resources that are available. So if you could talk a little about the plan versus the execution, where you start, what you do first, is the first general point. And the second general point is the city. How do you get the city involved in this? And the city now has an RFI, which they're the 15 corridors on the business front, and they're talking about trying to serve the neighborhood needs. This seems to be dead center out of their part too. And the third point, of course, is the public space, the parks and public spaces. How does what you're doing fit into the information the city is trying to gather now? What maybe you could respond to.
And Charles, you never just have one question. So let me start off first. This has been a process we've been working on for literally about 4 or 5 months now. So we've done a lot of what we'll describe as preliminary engineering, planning, budgeting, framing up what it really costs to do all the 9 neighborhoods if we put fiber in every residence, which there's about 90,000 residences. There's about 10,000 businesses in the area that we're looking at. And so we know what the cost of this is. We have pretty good understanding of what resources are available, and we started identifying local companies that knew where some of those resources were. You know, where there's conduit available, where there's fiber available, where there's a fiber partner available, so we've been out sort of, canvassing the community already. And I know we haven't found everything, so we're still looking. But that's part of the process. So we've already gone through what I call preliminary planning. We're now in the stages that we have a budget. And now in that budget, we know that we have a certain constraints on what we can start with. And so what we've really said is we're going to step back and start with as we said, gigabit sort of wireless overlay in the 9 neighborhoods. It gives us the capability to do more directed capacity. And maybe we do that with Bob. Bob's going to be a good guy, maybe to be a partner here. But providing that kind of an umbrella infrastructure that's fed then by fiber drains, so it has big, excess capacity into the network that we're ultimately building. And then primarily building the backbone infrastructure that gives us the fiber distribution that we need so that we can get low-cost access to homes. So our strategy really is built on a layered model of building infrastructure in an effective way that reduces the cost, that actually gets the cost, down. So we have some preliminary design work to do before we get to the end user design, and that's why the wireless overlay is an important part. The wireless in public space, and that is enabled by the gigabit wireless infrastructure that we first deploy. So there will be public space access and other services. And we hope to have some of that up in March and April timeframe. So we expect to move fairly quickly on that. We expect, because we found some conduits or places we have access, we'll have fiber backhaul and other capabilities quickly as well. And then really what we hope is that from that March, April through the end of summer, that we're really building out to the homes and the businesses and the other infrastructure. Now we're going to take a page out of Google's book. This is about demand. So the neighborhoods, in a way, have to come and tell us where that demand is, and that's part of the community engagement. Where is it that you need us to be? Because that's the first place we're going to go. So you tell us. I mean, that's part of the community dialogue here. Tell us where we need to go. Let's have that dialogue. And then we have to figure out financially how to make that work. And then, Charles, to the longer term, yes, we're raising capital. We're raising more capital. We realize this is a much more expensive proposition than what's been laid out. This is just stage 1. So consider this stage 1, where we're already working on stage 2, 3, and 4. So we will really, from the university perspective, we're working within the confines and constraints of where we are. But we're also looking at this as, this needs to have some expansion capability and growth so that we can have all 9 neighborhoods have that kind of ubiquitous connectivity that we're talking about now doing in 4 neighborhoods. Then answer the last question, and in that really was, how does the city participate here? Well, let me tell you, I think the city's already engaged. There's an RFI on the street.
The city is now saying, what can we do? What are the options? What do you, the community, bring to the table to help facilitate these kind of things happening? And they ask the question. Someone's got to answer the question. So I think it's incumbent on us, as well as many hundreds of other folks who are going to respond, to give the city a roadmap, to say, here's what we have. Here's what we can do. Here's how we can work together to collaborate, to build the kind of infrastructure the neighborhoods and the community needs. So in a way, that dialogue has started. It started in a formal way with an RFI. We're going to respond to that. As part of the 9 neighborhoods, we're going to have a response that says, this is how you can participate and partner with us. And this is what we can bring to the table. Now, what do you, city, what do you bring to the table as part of this collaboration? So we're going to create a roadmap for them. They've given us something to respond to. We'll create a roadmap for them and let them take a look at how can they now work with the neighborhoods here and maybe even replicate some of the things that we're building here in other neighborhoods throughout the city.
Well, that's a great segue. Great segue to the last 15 minutes of our discussion here, and we do want to kind of put a time limit on it, and people can hopefully have informal discussions afterwards. We want to again thank our host when we wrap this discussion. But as to the Chicago piece of this, how can this serve as a model, or how can this engage in the RFI that's on the street? Let me actually just throw out 2 more questions we've got from our electronic audience, and then get some more interactions. One is from Don Samuelson. He emails, you might want to work from problems to solutions as you consider when, how, and by whom is this project to be evaluated, so that there is an understanding of the costs, benefits, and processes so that the program can be replicated. So any thoughts on the evaluation of the project? And a second question from Dino Perdue, will Gigabit Squared allow a company to provide a competing service over their network? So let's get a couple of reactions to that.
Okay. And Don, you never asked a simple question either. So let me sort of respond to this, and I'm going to respond to the latter first. Yes, open competition, that's part of open access, and compete on service and price. Provide to the community what the community is asking for. That is really the framework of what we're building. To the other side is, how do you measure something like this? Well, I got to say the feds, the state, the local governments, everybody's tried to figure this out. We've had numerous conversations with NTIA on, how to come up with a framework to sort of assess, digital infrastructure capability and support. It's a hard problem. And a lot of people are addressing the idea of metrics in this phase. I'm going to tell you what the metric is. The metric is you. The metric is the consumer, the user, the people that engage in the use of the network. That is the metric. And somehow we've got to figure out how to capture that metric in a way that says there is value being created within the community by the results, the outcomes of the things that are beginning to happen as a result of having this in place. I don't know what that looks like today. I don't even know how to tell you how we get that measured, but I'm going to say that's part of the community dialogue. I think it's part of the observation. And I want to say having the university, having groups like, Pierre and Laura have been around a long time that have some sense of what this looks like, what it means to their neighborhoods is of value and importance to creating those kinds of metrics, creating feedback mechanism so that we hear from you what's working and what's not. Doesn't mean we can always fix it right away, but it yet lets us know what's not working, so we have the opportunity to have that dialogue and potentially figure out ways to improve and to invest more and to make this work in the way that it works best for the community.
Which passes to Laura.
Just a word on measurement, because for communities, it's going to be improvement of the quality of life. So just the way we measure literacy today, we're going to measure digital literacy and how we stand compared to our neighbors worldwide. And so as communities and anchor institutions think about their work and their mission-driven work, it's going to be the same indicators that we talked about before, and the backbone is going to enable us to measure more. But we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what those lead measures are. Those are the hard ones to figure out. What is the intervention that's really going to lead to the lag, and how this backbone will enable that. So we're going to have to look at this as an enabler look up into what those real lead measures are. And that's going to be the hard work. It's not going to be just counting things the way we've counted them before. We're not just going to be able to count heads and say that improves the quality of life because 10 children are digitally literate. It's going to be much more complex than that. And we're going to have to sort of have a think tank. The R&D component to this effort is going to have to be thinking about that. I know we're thinking about it as a neighborhood. I'm sure other neighborhoods are too. And we're going to have to come together with some common indicators that we can track to say this is how this has improved the quality of life for citizens of Illinois, and this is how we know it.
Will, is your comment still relevant? You wanted to make earlier? Okay. Are there additional questions? Yes.
My name is Norman Montgomery, and since 1998, I've been involved in technology with the community. I saw Ricochet go down in flames when they posted their first RFP in '98. I hosted the meeting that brought Doug Power and Scott Goldstein out on CivicNet in 2001. I hosted a meeting that brought out the Chicago Wi-Fi plan in 2005, and the thing that shot all of those down was right-of-way. And my question now is, with all this good stuff on the table, have we done the due diligence to secure the right-of-way to ensure the connectivity, not only between the different communities, but also the locations within the community itself? A couple lines of conduit ain't gonna get it.
Of course, that is the biggest issue facing most new entrants, right? I mean, the incumbents and the cable operators have solved their problem, right?
Right.
So the real issue is the community ready? And I will tell you, one of the things that we did is we evaluated, gig communities. So that was the question. What is the city's level of participation? What is their capability to support this? What is the community? What is the Are you going to be partners, or is this going to be really problematic? And I will say that the city has been very cooperative at sitting down with us, talking through the issues. We know we're going to have problems in a couple areas. We've already talked, and and what the city has said, we will listen, right? We will work with you. We've also learned our lessons in building these kind of networks in other parts of the country, as you've got to work with the local environment, people who understand the local environment and where those assets and resources and capabilities and partners are. We know that some of these carriers are going to be our partners. They're not going to say compete with us. Some are going to partner with us in various different ways. This is a collaborative co-opetition, and it is around. It's just that it's not a visible thing that most people see. And what we're going to take advantage with is building those relationships, capabilities, and capacity. Are we going to have problems? The answer is going to be yes. Can we solve them quickly? We hope so. Is it going to take years? No. We have a much different environment today because you have a mayor who's putting out an RFI because they want to do something. And they realize if they're the, obstruction to getting something done, that they got to fix it. And I give Chicago a lot of credit. They know these kinds of issues are there. They are ready to step up. And I think they're demonstrating that in their RFI. Okay, we're going to prove it out. We're the first guys who are going to go out and beat on them now, right? We're going to say, look, we need this and that, and we need you to give us permits this quickly, and you need to, okay. They're going to push back too, because that's the nature of it, trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. Is it the right thing to do? Because if I let you do it, 10 other people can do it. So this is all part of the dialogue still. Now this is the dialogue between us and the city and the people that own the rights of way, and we're going to have to work through that.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Some of that dialogue, as you just pointed out, has already taken place. But even yesterday, at the announcement, many of the city officials were there, and these kinds of conversations were happening yesterday. Okay, we're going to get CTA on board. We got to get this, got to get that. So, they're thinking about it. Again, I think that, as you pointed out, the RFI is a real indicator. And if you read through that, they talk about allowing access and doing some of those things. We'll see how, real that is once you really step up. But I've got confidence that I fully believe one thing to be true. If Mayor Emanuel wants something to get done and thinks that it's in the best interest of the city as a whole, that they'll work hard to make sure that that's a high possibility of happening. And that is to me enough confidence to move forward with the plan, knowing we don't know all the sort of turns and things that'll be out there in the future. but that we'll have partners that'll sit at the table, that when we do come across something that's difficult, that we'll be able to sit together as a team, community, partners, to really sit across and solve these issues directly and in a manner that doesn't impede the process such that it causes the deal to collapse.
As we move towards our conclusion, but before I do, I'd like to invite Sherry Runner to come and say a few words. We really, again, appreciate the Urban League and making this space available to us. And it's obviously a great facilitating space. And please join me in welcoming Sherry Runner.
I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to say thank you on the back end for coming here, and that we're very excited about the initiative being rolled out on the South Side. As you may or may not know, the Urban League is highly involved in strengthening communities around economic empowerment of our people, and we look forward to infusing into our programming in entrepreneurship and in education and in workforce development things that can happen around digital literacy and creating a pipeline for the future. So again, welcome to the Urban League, and please feel free to use this space again. We look forward to this happening with great anticipation.
Thank you so much. All right, as our final words, I'd like to invite Ernie Sanders, who's on the ground here representing our E-teams, to speak a little bit about how he can work with you in the coming weeks and months, and then we'll conclude with Brad Housewright speaking about how this speaks to our statewide efforts.
Thank you, Drew. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm very excited to be here, having spent the past 7 to 8 years in community and economic development, and then also the last, since 2006-07, working in this arena. To merge the two together is just really fabulous and phenomenal. I'm very excited and very eager to help where I can. I reside here in Chicago on the South Side. My office, I have an office downtown Chicago, but really I'm out in the community always. So I will continue to spend a lot of time with the players here in the room. I really look forward, Bob and Mark, to meeting Melody. I think she and I, and Will, I'm doing stuff with the university. We'll figure this all out and move it forward on behalf of the work that Laura and Pierre have done over the years. So thank you very much.
And in conclusion to that, just to echo Ernie, and in terms of what we can do, we really are excited from the opportunity of being able to help this be a success, but be a success for everyone who can take advantage of it. That's the customers, that's the providers, that's the city, that's the county. But even more so, how we push this out to the rest of the state, because that's truly, once we are connected from Chicago to Cairo, that's when we can really begin to take advantage of what's new out there and how we can really push entrepreneurship, virtual workforce, and lots of opportunities for our young folks and the up and coming. So thank you for participating. Please watch our website. We're going to have another webinar next Wednesday. There will be panelists on that webinar as we continue to try to focus on what becomes information that we can push back to the RFI. So again, like Mark was saying and Pierre and Laura, it's what do we do as communities? What do we want the city of Chicago to know, that they make sure that they implement in their plans moving forward. So we look forward to that. And we have one comment.
Fred, I know Drew was saying he wanted to keep this last 15 minutes for what we discussed on the last webinar, and that was how we should look at perhaps these applicants from the South Lakefront as a whole. I don't know if what we're saying is the Gigabit Challenge announcement means that we want to take a different direction than what we had talked about. So, that announcement happened yesterday, but our plan for a meeting with the E-team was to say, what should we look to do collectively for the Chicago broadband RFI? So I'm delighted that Mark is saying, this team is going to respond and lay out that roadmap. I think that there's been a lot of dialogue where the community has felt like they're not sure with the RFI, what the opportunity is. There isn't a sense of, it's just a request for information. So one of the things you had said in the last webinar was that when we met today, we were talking about whether or not it made sense to either share these 45 applicants who responded to the broadband challenge to then maybe direct them to these broadband RFI. I think we want to have some synergies and be smart, but again, I still want to do two trains running. And I think that one of the things that we were disappointed in seeing the city not stepping up yet to this makes us even more withdrawn in terms of the RFI. There's no commitment to. It's just that it's an RFI. It's like, give us your idea. So we've been involved in these, even with the recent cultural plan. This concept of having this participatory proposal. But I think that with you guys, we also recognize there was a promise there for execution, funding, what have you. So I guess that's what I was looking for these last 15 minutes was, what is the E-team suggesting? What should we be doing? You wanted us to have more synergy since there were 45 proposals that came out of the broadband challenge.
Well, I know that from our perspective, and it's not just from them. There's lots of good synergies that are going on with them, but because of the 45 applications that come from the city of Chicago for the Broadband Innovation Fund, from the Eliminate the Digital Divide, the CTC centers, you folks are in this every day. You're broadband enthusiasts. You have your ideas and your visions for best practice. And honestly, that's the kind of information that we were looking to gather and to continue to move that forward. And so I would encourage you to have those furthering conversations with Ernie about what that really looks like. And then we can take that information and on our next, webinar, we can take some segment time to talk about what those are and, what those best practices can be like. Because again, because of your involvement in being in the trench on a daily basis, you know what those best practices are that make sense, at least surrounded by what you're doing. And so that's what we were trying to respond back to, is that this is what we know. For those of us who are in the field, and for those of us who have done this for a number of years, it makes sense that we take that dialogue and then be able to put that dialogue in a format that we can submit back, at least on best practices.
It's great to have people like Chris who keep us honest. So thank you for raising that. We really appreciate everyone's time, and we want to clap loud enough so those out in the hall there can still hear us. Laura and Pierre, William, Bob, and Mark, and Brad, thank you for your participation here today with us, those of you who were online and those of you who came down to the Urban League, and really appreciate Sherry Runner and the Urban League. So thank you again.